oh he's fit, oh crazy, he's fit, oh man.
Hi, it's Colin McIntyre, and I'm really crazy about football. I've always loved football from being as young as I can remember right through to now. In my youth I played a lot, got involved in managing, and also was a club secretary for a while, so I did everything I could around football to my mid-30s, and then it's been mainly I'm an armchair critic. What I want to talk to you first of all is I want to go through my career as it was. It was all played at local league level, so not a very good level, but I didn't care. I played at the best level I could. It was the right level for me, and I had loads and loads of fun. Well, this has brought back some memories, pulling together a list of all the clubs I played for. I finished my career in my mid-30s, now touching 58, getting close to 58. So it's over 20 years since I stopped playing, other than playing a little bit of five-a-side football with some pub mates. So, but let's talk about my career. So, as I've said, I was always football crazy. As a boy, I lived with my two brothers in a tiny little street in Fishponds, Bristol, and no cars, or very few cars, and it was a no-through road, so we were able to play football morning to night, and that's what I did. Always had a football, always had footballs, football kits, football boots for Christmas, and that's what I did. I just played football. So the first time I was actually in a team was at 11, when St Joseph's, which was my primary school in Fishponds, used to have a five-a-side tournament each year that they entered. They didn't have a school football team at that stage, but they had a team once a year to enter a five-a-side tournament, which I think was probably Catholic schools, because it certainly was played at St Nicholas's. And so as an 11-year-old, my final year at primary school, I was the captain of that side. Unfortunately, we didn't win. No good luck story, but had a load of fun. And the first time I put on a football kit to play competitively, it was an old Celtic strip. About the same time, I joined the Cubs that were, and I don't remember the Cub proper name, but it was out of St Joseph's School, and I joined the Cubs purely and simply because they had a football team and would play football on Saturday mornings. So didn't last for long, because I got frustrated that as soon as we had any bad weather, the games were called off, and I just wanted to play. And at 11, I went off to secondary school. Now, the secondary school I went to, St Brendan's, was a grammar school, and they only played rugby. They didn't play any football. And they're a famous rugby school, and they've had lots of internationals from the school. So I had to play school rugby if you were picked, and I was. So I was in the first team for my age group, and then in the final year I played for the third 15. The bulk of the first and second teams were made up from sixth formers. I left school at 16, so I didn't go into the sixth form. So school rugby, and that meant I couldn't play football on a Saturday because I had to play the rugby. So I used to play a little bit for St Joseph's Parish. There was a couple of years during my school days where they entered a parish league, and so I used to play for them, and that was quite good because I was one of the younger players, playing with people 2 and 3 years older than me, so it was a good experience. At 17, when I left school, I couldn't find a Saturday football club immediately, so I played rugby actually for a year for a club called Ashley Down, but started playing football on a Sunday for a club called Kings. So a friend of my father's from the pub, the Greyhound, that I used to drink in, his son played football and his mates all played football, so they ended up setting up a team, or there were two teams set up actually, in the Catholic club in Knoll West, and the second team was called Kings, and that was the one I played for. The following year I then realised that Rolls-Royce apprentices had a football team, and so I started playing, packed up the rugby and started playing football for the apprentices. Initially, first couple of games in the reserves, but then fortunately I got into the first team. Played there for 2 years, I think, and at the same time the guy who'd been running the Kings team decided he wanted to run a team from the pub. He got some sponsorship from the pub, and so we created a new team called the Greyhound. So the Greyhound after the pub. So that was the first time I was playing Saturdays and Sundays football, which I couldn't believe my luck. That's as good as it gets for me. So after I left Rolls-Royce, I went to play for Clevewood, and Clevewood were a down inside, so they were closer to home for me, but also a number of the players, including my cousin John, played for Clevewood, as well as Park Rangers, and so I left the Greyhound and joined Park Rangers as a Sunday club. So Clevewood and Park Rangers, probably 6 or 7 of the players played for both teams, and I stuck with those teams for the rest of my career. So Clevewood reserves, I had about half a season, then got into the first team and stayed there. And Park Rangers, we actually had two clubs as well, but I was always in the first team. So that was my playing career. So Clevewood and Park Rangers I played for probably 12, 13 years, Saturdays and Sundays, and that's where I had my happiest memories, playing with my mates and my cousin. So Park Rangers, within a year of me joining, I was asked to manage the team, and the players asked me to manage them, which is what I did, and I did that for the rest of my career there. The last year or two as a co-manager, one of my mates, Craig, shared the task with me. But also I was into administration as well, so I liked to get fully involved in everything that was going on. And so certainly when I was at the Greyhound, I was a club secretary, which was interesting because at the start of the year you'd have to go and meet up with all the other secretaries and organise your fixtures. You had to organise the pitches through the local council, and the like. So that was a good grounding, and it, every local football team has 1 or 2 people who work behind the scenes, and it's quite hard work, and taken for granted by a lot of people. But I enjoyed that, and I was glad I had a chance to do that, and learnt quite a lot about being organised, which I was able to take into my career. So that's my football career. Low levels. Clevewood played in the Bristol District League. I think the highest we played was Division 2, I think. Rolls-Royce apprentices were in the Bristol Suburban. Prior to that, the Bristol and Avon. And Park Rangers played in the Sunday Regional Leagues, so all GFA leagues or Gloucestershire Football Association leagues. Several promotions, no championships. We went up second a couple of times and did get to a cup final where we got beat with Park Rangers in the intermediate cup final, which was a huge disappointment. But it was fantastic to get to the final, and we treated it like a good day out. Everybody dressed in suits, and we hired a coach, and we had a bit of fun along the way. So that was my football career. I'd have loved to have been a better player, and I'd loved to have actually had a chance to play better standard of football. But as it was, I found a level that was good for me, and enjoyed it tremendously. Now it's time to create some debate. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick my best 11 football team of all the players that I've been fortunate enough to see. When you've looked at my team, why not have a go and put yours together? Drop me a line in the comments if you want to tell me where we differ. In goal, eventually I came to the conclusion I had to go with Peter Schmeichel. I was very tempted to put Gordon Banks in because he was England's World Cup winning goalkeeper, was a fantastic goalkeeper. I saw him a lot as I was a young boy, playing for Leicester and Stoke, and was a legend, and recently died, unfortunately. But Peter Schmeichel, when Man United were at their pomp, was just incredible. He just pulled off saves that I'd never seen anybody else attempt. He brought what they call a star jump save into the league. Again, I'd never seen any other keeper try that at the time. And he was just a winner. You know, he organised his defence. He was happy to have conflict and tell people what to do, and there were strong characters in the United team at the time, but he wasn't worried about reputations. Given the size of him, I guess he probably could look after himself. But a fantastic keeper. Won the Europeans with Denmark, and he also won a Champions League with Manchester United. So a hugely successful career. He was voted the best keeper in the world twice, and certainly at the time he was with United, I don't think there was ever a better keeper than that. You know, he had a period, 4 or 5 years, where he was just incredible. I also remember him as he was finishing off his career, scoring a magnificent volley for Aston Villa, which was something I'm sure he enjoyed a lot. Choosing my right back was probably the easiest decision of any position on the pitch, and that is the Brazilian Cafu. Now, his records just speak for themselves. He's the most capped Brazilian player of all time. 140 odd caps, I think. He went to 4 World Cups and got to the final 3 times. He won the World Cup twice, once as captain. When he played in Italy, he won league championships, the Scudetto, with 2 different teams, with Roma and then with Milan. Just an absolutely incredible player. The few times I saw him play outside of World Cups was when he played against English sides in Europe, or Brazil played England occasionally. And the man's fitness was just incredible. He was a talented footballer, but it was his athletic ability that just stood out. He could run up and down that pitch at an incredible rate. So he was able to defend, but he was always joining the attack as well. Just incredible stamina. Years ago, I remember we used to have a footballer in England, Colin Bell. They used to call him Nijinsky because he could run forever. And Cafu was like that, but more so. The fittest player I ever saw. And obviously you don't play for Brazil unless you're hugely talented as well, which he was. And as I say, he had success, won league championships. He won a Champions League as well. So loads of caps, Champions League, and 2 lots of World Cup, 2 times a World Cup winner. There could only be one choice at right back, and that is Cafu. My left back was an easy choice as well. He was always going to be in my side. My issue was, did I play him as a left back or a centre half? Because he was equally adept at playing in both positions. And the person I'm talking about is Paolo Maldini. So the Italian was just about the best defender I saw, just pipping Franco Baresi into my team because of his versatility, the fact that he could play full back as well as in the centre half. Now, again, I first became aware of Maldini watching him play European football. I would see him come across the English sides or British sides and watch the games, and he was outstanding every time. You know, he was a serial winner with Milan. So 5 Champions League titles, and some losses in finals as well. I think he won the league 7 times in Italy. They were one of the best sides you'd ever see, full of talent, but as defenders they were fantastic, and Maldini was right up there. Over 120 caps for Italy, got to World Cup finals and Euro finals, but lost both, so actually didn't win a tournament with Italy as an Italian captain, which is a real shame, because in all of those tournaments that he played in, he was always voted in the best 11 players in the tournament. Just a top class, consistent defender, and would score the odd goal as well, but just made the game look really, really easy. And even though sometimes he was breaking my heart by beating our teams in Europe, when you're as good as those people, all you can do is watch them and be impressed. Now, my first central defender would get into any side picked by an Englishman of my age, I'm sure. And that man is Bobby Moore. So Bobby Moore was an absolute legend in England, having captained us to our only World Cup win in 1966. So there couldn't have been a more popular guy. But also he was a truly, truly world-class player. I think his highest accolade would be that Pele, the fantastic Pele, who was the best player in the world for years and years and years, said that Bobby Moore was the best defender he ever played against. I think the incredible thing about Moore was his reading of the game, because he didn't have pace. You know, he should have, with the pace he had, got caught out more often. He just never did. And his tackling was really clean. He hardly ever went to ground. Just toe would come out and he'd pick the ball. Incredible defender. Captain England from 23, so a natural leader. Very, very nice man. Everybody who worked with him after he left playing said he had no arrogance about him at all. He'd never been affected by the success. Just a fantastic guy. I remember watching him in 1970, so although I was alive when we won the World Cup, I don't really remember seeing it live. But 1970 was the biggest World Cup for me. First one in colour. I was 10. Because England were champions, there was a massive build-up to the game, to the tournament and each of the games. And the England-Brazil game in that World Cup, where Brazil beat us 1-0, was a fantastic game of football. England could easily have drawn and even won that game. They had several chances. But the standard of football, England were a really classy side at that time. And Brazil even more so. But Bobby Moore was a standout in that game. Some of his tackles and interceptions were as good as I've ever seen. Okay, the final man in my defence was one of those elegant defenders that seemed to have loads of time on the ball and able to read a situation fantastically. Very similar to Bobby Moore, but der Kaiser, Franz Beckenbauer, had more pace than Moore, but very similar in many ways. Now, Franz Beckenbauer is a legend in football. You know, he captained West Germany to the World Cup, to winning the World Cup. He actually then managed Germany to a World Cup as well. Was massively influential, and still is today, in the German game. But I remember Germany were always great rivals to us through the 60s and 70s, and whenever he played, he was fantastic and really elegant. Won European Cups, I think 3 of them, the World Cup, and as I say, managed the World Cup side as well. But I think what I remember most about him, he was the first person I saw play as a sweeper. As somebody who just tidied up and then started the attacks going. He wasn't an old-fashioned just kick the ball out, get the ball away. He didn't like giving the ball away. He liked to be part of the team that started the move. And I guess he played early days for Germany or for West Germany in midfield. And it was that skill set that he took with him when he moved backwards. So definitely a giant of the game. He was also one of the people that was very famous and went out when they tried to relaunch football in the States in the 70s. So Beckenbauer went out there at the same time as Pele and had a successful career there and helped the game certainly take off for a little while. But I remember, hearing about the New York Cosmos and how football was taking off at the time. Beckenbauer and Pele were key people in that movement. So a really great footballer and an even better football man. This next pick, so my first midfielder, was very easy for me as well. Another English legend, and that's Bobby Charlton. So Bobby Charlton, as most people know, was one of the Busby Babes. Fortunately, he was one of those that survived the Munich air disaster, and was able to come back from that and help United go all the way through and actually win the European Cup, which had been their dream, and what they'd been chasing up to that plane crash. So Bobby Charlton played from the 50s right through to the 70s and was a star for all that period for both England and for Manchester United. So at Manchester United he was known as the Holy Trinity with George Best and Dennis Law, 3 fantastic players. But Bobby Charlton was elegant throughout his career, with fantastic shot in both feet and scored great goals. As a boy I had a videotape, or as a teenager I had a videotape of 100 Bobby Charlton goals, and it was fantastic to see how many of them he rifled in from distance. He really had an explosive shot. So a European Cup winner, won the league twice with Manchester United, has been knighted for his services to football, so still involved in the game, a director at Manchester United, trying to help them get out of the bad patch at the moment, but an ambassador for Manchester United, an ambassador for English football, famous wherever he goes, and people always reflect fondly on the wonderful player that was Bobby Charlton. My next midfield player is possibly a controversial choice. As somebody who's half Irish, my father was Irish, I felt that I needed to include an Irishman in my team, and that man is Roy Keane. Now, Roy Keane has a will to win that on occasion oversteps the mark, and even now as a football pundit, he can sometimes be scathing in his criticism. So he is an unusual character. But as a footballer, he was non-stop a perfect midfielder. And he played at a time when there were good midfielders about, and he still shone. So in the Premier League, he won multiple Premier League titles with Manchester United. Was captain them, was part of the team that won the Champions League, although he didn't play in the final. But he was an unselfish player. He would do all the hard yards, if you like. He was up and down the pitch. Certainly as a youngster, he was quite attacking, but as he got older, he was slightly more defensive naturally, but he never shied away from doing the hard work. He was always prepared to set the standards for United, and if people didn't live up to it, the standards, he would tell them in no uncertain terms, apparently around the training ground, but you'd see it mostly on the pitch. He was fantastic going forward, really hard in the tackle, and he played for the Republic of Ireland, so, not a side that's likely to win any tournaments. But Roy Keane was always the best player on the pitch. It didn't matter who they were playing, even if they were playing Holland or someone with class players, he stood out. So definitely, possibly in the top 2 or 3 players ever in the Premiership League, the Premiership here in the UK. A fine international career, plenty of controversy, but that doesn't detract from the fact that the guy was a fantastic midfielder. So another controversial choice, but it was the only way I could get all the best footballers into the side that I wanted. So my third midfield player is amongst the best players I've ever seen. He is today still performing at an incredible level, which he's been doing for about 12 or 14 years. And that is the Portuguese wonder, Cristiano Ronaldo. I first became aware of him when he came to Manchester United. And in his first few games, he looked a bit of a show pony, had some fancy tricks, but looked like he didn't have much more than that. You got the feeling that he might be a good winger and be able to take people on, but he was a bit lightweight, he got knocked about a bit, and you weren't quite sure why Manchester United had paid a record fee for a teenager. To watch how his career developed from there and how quickly has been astounding. Just incredible growth. And when people are interviewed that have played with him, so some of the ex-United players talk about him, they said he always said he was going to be the best player in the world. He worked incredibly hard at becoming the footballer that he is. Now, he's won the Ballon d'Or 5 times, so 5 times people have said, have agreed that he's the best player in the world. And we are really blessed at the moment that we have Cristiano and Lionel Messi both playing football at a level I've never seen before. Now, when Ronaldo was at United, I mean, our great hope in England was Wayne Rooney, who was a fantastic player and has had a great career. But to start off with, you had 2 teenagers, who looked like they could become world beaters. One of them became a great English player, but one of them became the best player in the world. And he did that by having a desire to improve that was second to none. To see him move from Manchester United, where he was fantastic playing alongside Rooney, they would break from an opponent's corner right the length of the pitch and slot the ball away. They seemed to do it week after week. They were exciting to watch. When he went to Real Madrid, you thought he's not going to, he can't get any better than he was at United. And he just got better and better and started having seasons where he was scoring 50 goals and 60 goals in a season, which is incredible. His European record is fantastic. He's won 5 Champions League titles. He won the Euros with Portugal, and really, he was the best player in their team by a mile. So he carried them forward, and in that team he was captain, and acted like a captain, which, if you'd seen the surly teenager at Manchester United, you would have never thought that he would become that kind of player. He left Real Madrid, which was a surprise, and has now gone to Juve, and he's now won a Serie A title as well. So he is a class act who wins wherever he goes. His game is so difficult to find weaknesses. Positionally, he's fantastic. He's got great pace. He's got magnificent strength. He's not pushed off the ball very easily. He may go down occasionally, but that's when it suits him. He has a fantastic leap. He can score with both feet. He can tap them in. He can do fancy flicks. He really is a pleasure to watch. And for those of us that have been able to see most of his career, it's been a real pleasure. So my first forward player, and I'm going to have him floating between the midfield and the forwards, is Lionel Messi. It is impossible at the moment not to feel that we're very lucky to have people like Messi and Ronaldo playing football at the same time. They are an incredible standard for everybody who follows the game to try and achieve. They have set the benchmark much higher than before, and so competing against each other, whether they actually do, I don't know. Messi has also won 5 Ballon d'Ors, the same as Ronaldo, and his scoring record is very similar. As I write this now, or create this video now, Messi has scored 698 senior goals, which is just incredible. He's spent his whole career with Barcelona, 40 odd trophies, 10 league wins, 6 Copa del Reys, and 4 Champions Leagues. So Messi has been hugely successful at club level. His Argentinian career has been less impressive, but I think he's been unfortunate that he's actually been playing in a side that just isn't at its strongest at the moment, and he's just not quite been able to drag them through on his own. Every time I've seen him play, which is not that often, it's always European matches against the British sides, what amazes me is not just the fact that he is a fantastic dribbler and the ball's stuck to his feet and he just waltzes around people for a pastime. He's very elusive as well, and so takes up positions that people don't like, and people lose him quite often. But the other thing that really strikes me is he can really pass a ball, and it's unusual. People that are good dribblers often get their head down and don't appreciate their teammates' position. Well, Lionel Messi is different. He can dribble, but he is completely heads up, and he will play exquisite through balls to teammates. So he's very much a team player, and his attitude is far he doesn't show the level of arrogance, or if you like, top confidence that Ronaldo does. He's very much keeps himself to himself, on the pitch as well as off it. But his teammates must relish playing with him, because one, he can do things that they'll never be able to do, and two, he improves their game by the way he finds them with wonderful passing. So, an absolute star. The next player, I had to have this little genius in my team. For a period, he was definitely the best player I saw, and that is Maradona. Now, as an Englishman, we have a real love-hate with Maradona, hating the fact that he cheated a goal against us in the 1986 World Cup, but he then scored the best goal I've ever seen as the second. So he was absolutely tremendous. He went to 4 World Cups, nearly went to an earlier one when he was a young man, but was kept out of the limelight. But he was a star for a long, long time. Now, I didn't see much of his time in Spain or in Italy. There wasn't that much televised football in the UK from those leagues at the time. But apparently what he did in Italy in particular, helping Napoli win their first 2 Serie A titles, was incredible. No one had expected them to do anything like that, and Maradona came and twice they won the league title. So, at club level, he obviously did great things as well. But it was for Argentina that he provided some of those incredible memories for me. He played in a pretty good Argentinian side. He wasn't the only good player, but he was the best player by a mile. But I think at the time he was the best player in the world by a country mile. Now, a lot of people would say that he's the best player in the world. Other people will argue it's Pele, and more recently Ronaldo and Messi have set a standard that's very difficult to argue wouldn't be up there with those Maradona and Pele. But Maradona, at his best, whizzing past 4 or 5 people, ball glued to his feet, just was as exciting as you would see in football. Broke English hearts, but if you're going to do it, then do it in a way as he did. Fantastic player. Again, a controversial figure. Certainly has his moments, as they say. Now, I'm sure none of you are shocked to see the last player on my World 11, and that is Pele. Without doubt, seeing the 1970s World Cup when I was 8 was the most exciting football I have ever seen. It was in colour for the first time. The Brazilian strip, which was, gold or yellow, looked so exciting. I'd been hearing about how good the Brazilians were, but in 1966 they'd been kicked out of the tournament. Or Pele had been kicked out of the tournament and they didn't do so well. But in previous World Cups they'd been fantastic apparently. So I was waiting to see this for myself. I'd heard about Pele. Everyone said he was the best player in the world in all the magazines you'd buy as a child. And the football I knew, as they all talked about this guy Pele as being the best footballer in the world. And in 1970 I could sit there and watch the games and find that was actually true. So 1970 was an exciting time for England because we were the holders and we had a really good squad going out to that World Cup. Still had some world-class players from 66 and some new talent as well. Sometimes people say the 70 squad was better than 66. I think it's difficult to say that when they didn't win, but they certainly were a great side. But Brazil, and Pele in particular was something else. And if I just talk about some of my memories of that World Cup featuring Pele, as a child, it just was the most fantastic, magical period. So, things that Pele did that I'd never seen anyone else do. So, they were in the same group as England, and in one of their matches against Czechoslovakia, Pele took a shot from in his own half, and keeper was scrambling back, and fortunately it didn't go in, or fortunately from the from Czechoslovakia's point of view, it didn't go in. But as a football fan, you just wanted it to. And then later in the tournament, and I think that was out of the group stage, maybe the quarterfinals when they were playing Uruguay, and Pele sold a dummy to the goalkeeper, just ran across the ball, let the ball go. Keeper was nowhere, and the ball just trickled outside of the goal, just outside the post. Again, it would have been the most fantastic goal. Nobody played like that in England. There was nobody who had that thought power, or even, that the audacity to try it. The England match, group match, which Brazil won 1-0, is famous for a Gordon Banks save from Pele. What I remember about that save, the first thing that impressed me was just how high Pele got up in the air, and how he hung there and then headed the ball with real power. So it was a fantastic save, an incredible save, and Gordon Banks was an incredible goalkeeper. But the height and strength of Pele in the air, and he wasn't that tall a man, he just had a fantastic spring, which of course he showed again in the final when he scored the first goal against Italy. The second thing about that final is the last goal by Carlos Alberto, the fullback, the captain, and it involves a lovely move by Brazil. But it comes to Pele, and he's just nonchalant as he pushes the ball wide. Now, apparently, in interviews since, he says, well, we always knew that Carlos would be running up to take it, so I knew he'd be there. I didn't really need to take a look. But it was just football from a different planet. So I loved that World Cup. I loved that Brazil side. It's the best footballing side I remember. And Pele was the star of it. And he was the best player of a very, very good bunch of world-class players. I don't know much about his, the standard of his club career. Obviously, he was very famous with Santos, and Santos came on tour across the world regularly. They were almost like a Harlem's Globetrotters team. They were coming to play packed out stadium, and they would play attractive football for everybody to watch. But I do know that he scored over 1,000 goals, which no matter what standard of football you were playing, is incredible. But it's at the World Cups, the best players, like Maradona did, they shine at World Cups. And Pele played in 4 and won 3. And you can't really do much better than that. So I grew up thinking he was a fantastic player. I've never heard or seen anything that tells me he wasn't. I wish I'd seen more of him. I wish we had the coverage that we have of Ronaldo and Messi today. Unfortunately, that's not the case. But YouTube clips are worth searching out just to watch the genius of Pele. So that was my World 11, and I had a load of fun choosing those 11. Now, I had contemplated having 5 or 10 substitutes, but I thought that would be defeating the object. So if you have a go yourself, it's 11 players and 11 players only. Now, who would captain that side? There are a number of captains in there. Roy Keane would have been a good captain, but I think having watched the 86 Argentinian side, I think it has to be Maradona who would captain that side. But I'm sure him and Roy Keane would occasionally have the odd heart-to-heart, shall we say. So that team might be a bit short in midfield, but they've got great defenders, and certainly going forward you would never see more attractive football. I would have loved to have seen them play, and maybe I'll dream about it tonight. So I guess I had to do that at some stage. It's now time for me to talk to you about my club, the club that I've always followed, and also the sides I like to watch as well. So the big reveal is that my club is based in Bristol, where I was born and bred, although I live in Oxford now. And we know ourselves, the supporters know ourselves as the Gas. Our official nickname is the Pirates. We play in the third tier of English football, confusingly now called League One. And my club, the one I've always followed, the club that's close to my heart, although it's had very little success during that time, is Bristol Rovers. So why Bristol Rovers? Really, it was just geography. It was I was brought up in Fishponds. Bristol Rovers at the time played at Eastville, about 2-3 miles away, and so as a youngster, me and my cousins would walk from Fishponds to Eastville Park into the stadium, and the stewards would let us in at half time for free. So started watching them in the early 70s. Always loved the club. And stuck with them despite the fact that they haven't been successful. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to show you some of the players that I enjoyed watching. Now, I watched whenever I could when I wasn't playing football or playing rugby when I was at school, and so I haven't been, someone who sees every single game. Unfortunately, I've never been in that position. But I watched quite a lot through to about 1990, and I must say since then I've not watched much football live. Just don't get the opportunities. Other things keep me too busy. But I'll talk about some of the players who were playing at the time I started watching, and over the next few years were heroes of mine. Now, Bristol Rovers were founded in the 1880s, so a very old club. 1883, as you can see there, and they've got a pirate emblem, which led to the nickname the Pirates. Apparently, a pirate emblem was used in the programs, matchday programs, in the 1930s. Now, I've drawn or put the background on here, which is the checked blue and white, because that's the shirts that Bristol Rovers played in. Again in the 1930s, and then maybe 1980s that they decided to reintroduce that. So when I show you some of the original players that I was following when I started following the club in the 70s, you'll see that actually in those days they wore blue shirts and white shorts. It's only later days that they switched to this checked blue and white that they wear now. Now, I'm just going to be quiet for a few seconds and let you listen to what is the Bristol Rovers theme tune and the song that the fans sing incredibly. It's always fantastic to hear a crowd singing a song such as this.
Irene, good night. Irene, good night. Good night, Irene, and good night, Irene. I guess you in my dream.
Now, obviously, when a football crowd sing it, it sounds a little different. Nowadays, most Bristol Rovers fans are known as the Gas, and that's actually from the Eastville days when at the old Eastville Stadium there were some gas works there. and opposing fans used to take the mick out of the Rovers fans because they could smell gas. Well, the Rovers took to that and will always be known as the Gas. So I had to mention some of the players that I really enjoyed watching them for all sorts of different reasons, which I'll explain now. But these players were ones that I thought were stars when I was watching the Rovers as often as I could. They're not necessarily the best players that Rovers have ever had, but they certainly had moments which were exceptional, and I'll just go through them very quickly for those people who haven't been ardent Bristol Rovers fans. So the Rovers always had a connection with South Wales, which is not surprising. Again, that's a geographical closeness between us, and the first 4 players I'm going to talk about were all Welsh, young Welsh lads at different times. So when I first started watching the Rovers, the best player by a mile was Wayne Jones. So Wayne Jones, he was capped by Wales, I think just the once, and his career was finished by a serious injury. But he was a really, really gifted midfield player, made the team work. And most of my youth when I was watching Bristol Rovers, they were playing in the 3rd division or the 3rd level of English football. So not an awful lot of great football, quite hard and rugged football. And to have somebody in the middle of the park who would just control a game or play just behind the forwards was fantastic. So Wayne Jones was a great footballer. Second was Frankie Prince. Now, Frankie Prince was the Bristol Rovers' hard man in midfield. He was the one who could put the boot in, and he was only with us for a few years when I was watching, but the few times we used to play Bristol City, our main rivals in what was known as the Gloucester Cup, the 2 senior teams in the Gloucestershire Football Association would play every year, and it'd be always Rovers and the City. Big game for the fans because often we were in different divisions. The City have tended to be a division higher most of the time. Frankie Prince and Jerry Gow was Bristol City's equivalent. They would kick each other all over the park, and so were fantastically loved by the fans. I once had my hair cut sat next to Frankie Prince in my local barber's in Fishponds. He was very particular about getting it just so. Probably the most gifted player I saw at the Rovers over a long period was David Williams. So David Williams, again, was a creative midfield player, a Welsh international, and again in Division 3, and he played quite a lot of football when we were in Division 2. To have as much talent as he did really stood out. Final Welshman was a bit later and towards the end of when I saw them, and captained us for a promotion in 1990 when we won the league, and one of my most exciting days. I went away with his last game of the season to Blackpool, and if we won that game we were champions, and we did. We all went in Bermuda shorts and shirts and froze because we were in a covered stand. But Vaughan Jones was just a steady Eddie, very rarely got beaten as a defender, organised a defence, well, a good honest pro. I think I realised the difference between, the 3rd and 2nd divisions and Division 1 as it was at the time when Bristol Rovers got called up to or drew Liverpool in, I think, the League Cup, and we went up to Anfield for a night match, and Vaughan Jones was given a run around by a teenage Steve McManaman. He couldn't get anywhere near him, and you just realise nobody in our division can do that to Vaughan Jones. Okay, so moving on. So actually a Bristolian was Dick Shepherd. So Dick Shepherd was the goalkeeper when I started following the Rovers. Hugely popular player. Saved a penalty which allowed us to win the Watney Cup, which was the first trophy we won when I was following them, and was always a legend. Fractured his skull in a football accident and was never really the same again, and Rovers moved him on and brought in a succession of great keepers actually, but Dick Shepherd was the first one I watched and always loved watching him. Paul Randall was a local lad, wasn't from Bristol, I think he was from Polton or around that area, so a southwest lad anyway, and came out of the amateur leagues and semi-pro football and signed up for the Bristol Rovers. And he had a couple of seasons where he just was incredible. He got himself a big money move into the first division with Stoke. Later came back and played for the Rovers again. But he was on fire for a couple of seasons. Scored important goals, scored lots of goals, and scored important goals in an FA Cup run, which meant he was a god to the Rovers fans. One of the reasons I loved the Rovers as soon as I saw them, and my dad didn't get many Saturdays off, and so he didn't take me to football very much. But as a child, occasionally he would take me to the Rovers, and also occasionally to the City. He had friends that were City supporters, so we would go if there was a game, and I didn't care which game I saw, but I was always a Rovers fan. The Rovers always played with two wingers, and they had Harold Jarman. Now, Harold Jarman is probably the most famous, or one of the most famous Bristol Rovers players all time. Played for years and years and years out on the wing. Fantastic servant. I think he probably had more games for Rovers than anybody else. Also played professional cricket for Gloucestershire, so an all-round sportsman, but a fantastic footballer and a fantastic guy. And then there was Ray Graydon on the other wing when I first started watching him, only for maybe a season or so. And I'm talking probably the 60s now. But Ray Graydon was a fantastic winger, local lad, local to me. And he got a big move to Aston Villa, which actually worked well for us because we brought in Brian Godfrey, who was an experienced guy and captained us through promotion and success afterwards. I believe he probably captained us in the Watney Cup win as well. But Ray Graydon was an exciting player, and he did well for himself once he left the Rovers. When I first started going to the Rovers, or certainly within the first year or two, you could not miss this guy, Stuart Taylor. He was about 6'5". I think he was one of the biggest centre halves, or biggest players in professional football at the time. And he really was a rock. He just was rarely beaten. And the thing that surprised me, because he was with the Rovers for a long time, and occasionally you would come across a real quality player, and I remember Mick Shannon being one. So Mick Shannon was an England international playing for Southampton, and was sharp, so you'd expect him to give a 6'5" giant a run around. There was none of that. Stuart Taylor marked him out of the game. So, although he was great in the air as you would expect, there was more to him than that. He was solid. An exciting time for me was a period when Rovers were always around the promotion places, including one promotion. But just for a couple of years, they had these two together. Bruce Bannister on the left, he was Grab, and Alan Warboys on the right, he was Smash. And between them, they just had a fantastic partnership, and they would absolutely overrun teams. We beat Brighton 8-2 when Brian Clough was a manager there. I think Warboys scored 4 and Bannister 3 that day. But all season, the pair of them would score goals in great numbers. Alan Warboys I met, he lived in an estate close to me, a housing estate close to me, a new estate. And he was a fantastic guy, really friendly guy. I think he's from Sheffield or up north, which they tend to be a bit friendlier than down south. But yeah, really no airs and graces, and a nice guy to talk to. Had to include Ollie, so Ian Holloway, famous as a Rovers player, played for us a few times, but went off and did some other good things in his career. Really made the best of his career. He was a steady Eddie, but did well for himself. More famous now as a manager and a bit of a comedian when he's interviewed on telly. But he was always a great lad. And I used to go and buy a curry in Kingswood on a Saturday night. And often while I was queuing, Ollie would come in. He's just got off the team bus and he's getting to buy a curry as well. The fans would always tease him, how'd it go, Ollie? Because he didn't score very often. Oh, I scored 2, he'd say, and we'd been beaten 3-0. A really nice, funny lad. So those are the players that I've picked out today. I could have picked out hundreds, but these are players I enjoyed watching tremendously. So I think season 2019-2020 is going to be very similar and a disappointing one for us. So if we come down the league, we're actually 13, so about halfway. Doesn't look like promotion or relegation are going to be things to keep us interested this year. It is early days and hopefully things will pick up, but at the moment it looks like it's going to be very much a middling season. So that's Bristol Rovers. The Bristol Rovers is my club. I think nowadays, though, the standard of football in the Premiership is such that all of us are entitled to have a second team to follow one of the teams that are in the Premiership, because the game that's played there is very different to you see in the lower levels of the English football pyramid. So I follow Manchester United. So we're having a difficult time at the moment, but over the last 10 or 12 years, they've kept me entertained thoroughly with attacking football of the highest quality. I hope you've enjoyed this video. It's been really fun shooting it. If you do, please give me a thumbs up and tell me you liked it. And if you'd like to see more videos like this, more videos from people who are crazy or mad about football, then do subscribe to the channel. Until the next video, bye bye.
Oh, he's football crazy, he's football mad.